and where they start terraforming. Imagine if they started terraforming planets in space to kind of make them their own little corporate HQ. That would be horrible. I'm
Oh, that'd be awful. They'd start like some sort of weird dystopian government based on capitalism. That's like the goal of
it
capitalism, isn't
it
it?
yes, exactly. It's comparable to the worst segue in the world, which is what we're doing. Um,
You know, I strongly disagree. I think we should talk about Outer Worlds right now.
yeah, I agree. I agree.
All right, so Outer Worlds, pretty straightforward. I feel like from the trailer. Oh, by the way, did you ever watch the launch trailer for this? I wanted to talk to you
Oh
about
yeah.
this.
Oh yeah, I watched it instantly.
Big Guardians vibe.
Oh yeah. And that's how I play it, to be honest.
Yeah, we talked about this. That was the character you went for, right?
Yeah, I didn't really mean it that way. I kind of went in just, blindly, as you can. And just as I got a crew, just became, I wanted to be indifferent, and it became I might be indifferent for a good amount of money. Then I'm like, nah, I'll help people if I think they're good. Which in this game, it's hard to judge when you're working for these corporations.
I don't know. It's not too hard to judge. I find myself a lot of the times going to my personal opinion and just being like, let's burn this mother
I
down!
wouldn't.
And just start going against every corporate entity possible.
I just wouldn't get anything done if that was my mind thought. Just burn it all down. The Marauders.
I, you know, just the general like mega corporation. Oh, look at this! They own this entire planet. The whole workforce has to do what they say. There is actually on the first planet. All right, you know what? Before we do all this, let's give a brief description of the game. So, Outer Worlds takes place in the future. It's a sci-fi action RPG where you're pretty much a low-grade worker that was frozen in cryosleep for an extended period of time, awakened by a mad scientist to repair the ship and get these colonists back. And it starts off from there, and you land in basically what I would describe as a capitalistic dystopian hellscape, full of planets that are owned by corporations and everyone doing their bidding.
And it's weird when you go on it. It's not, it very much harkens a lot of great references like 1984 by George Orwell, and They Live, which was a great film, which really calls out a lot of what we know to be inherent flaws, no matter where you lie on that discussion of capitalism. You can definitely see this doesn't seem too far off. I mean, you go on these planets, you see all these signs for different products and stuff just in your face, and it's just like going downtown.
Yeah, but in this one, it just seems like every single person is just at the like ultra bidding corporation. They're in contracts for life. There's a mission on the first planet where you go around collecting burial fees. You remember that one? Did you do it?
Yeah,
Okay, so when you go to the factory and you talk to the woman, do you remember why she has to pay the burial fees?
I don't recall. That was a while ago for me.
It was either her coworker or next of kin or someone she was related to shot themselves on company property
Yeah.
and the bullet hit something and she had to pay for the damages.
Right, and okay, I remember now. And a lot of them, she might have been the character I'm thinking of because I'm going off of memory. One of them was paying fees for someone they weren't even related to. They just vaguely knew the person, and they had to pay these fees because suicide was viewed as destruction of company property. So if you killed yourself, your loved ones or just someone who freaking knew you would have to pay all these fines because you damaged company property by killing yourself.
And that's how the game that's a side quest how the game starts. It's
The
awful.
satire's on the nose. I mean, Starship Troopers level on the nose satire.
It is a beautiful game though. Everything from the gameplay to the world, the story, I just really enjoy everything you get to do. And since we're getting into the conversation a little bit, you play it as a low rank Guardians of the Galaxy, right?
Oh yeah, I basically play as the Guardians of the Galaxy. I mean, I got Felix, I got Nyoka, and I don't remember the first companion you get, but she kind of stays on my ship 'cause she's an engineer, so I only bring her when I need her. But yeah,
Or Vardy.
yeah, okay, I would have never remembered that.
Or Pavardi, something like
I
that.
even did her side quest, which I enjoyed. I enjoyed her. She idolizes this big engineer, and they begin a correspondence. I don't know. I keep thinking they said letters, but I'm pretty sure it's like email or whatever. They
Yeah,
do.
it's
I think
email. I mean, you're traveling in
yeah, it's
space.
circa the year 2300. I'm sure. Even though in this universe,
Right, it's definitely up there.
I believe a big reason why these corporations are so powerful is because Theodore Roosevelt never, was elected to presidency, and he was, I think had a nickname known as Trustbuster, to where he really wanted to limit the power of corporations. Because during his presidency, you would see the rise of these oil companies and private security companies they would contract, which is very much what this game for me as a history buff kind of harkens to, like the Pinkerton Detective Agency being employed by the oil Mongols. It reminds me much of that. However, I do kind of wish this game had, like with New Vegas, another Obsidian heavy, developed game.
New
You
Vegas.
get to join Kaisar's Legion. You get to ally with Powder Keggers. Maybe I don't think I'm that far into the game, but I have yet to see where you could ally with those negative factions.
Well, it's traditional RPG style. If you're familiar with Fallout, like you definitely are, I know you are. I'm sure most of our fans are, and people who have played Outer Worlds. You do get a couple choices, but overall, it's an enjoyable game. I went with more of a Han Solo esque build, where it's more like a gunsling and silver tongue guy. I keep pretty constant companions around me, Sam and Vicar Max. I really just enjoy having like the giant acid shooting robot, and then Vigor Max because, as I mentioned to you, and I haven't really talked about on the podcast, he reminds me a lot of a character in my book that actually came out 4 days before this video game did. And I do know I told you the story behind that, but essentially, my book came out 4 days before this game did, and in my book, I have a character named Father Max. And Father Max is a shady guy who more or less works in a black market capacity and does a lot of things that wouldn't necessarily, actually happen in real life. Guys, my book's fucking great. You should really check it out. Father Max is awesome. Now, there are some definite differences, but the first time I played through Outer Worlds, I had to, you do your missions in there, and like I mentioned before, I went against the company and I just took their power. And so everyone there turned hostile to me. So I went out of my way to go through the town to kill Vicar Max because I was so mad that this game had a character that was just like the one I came up with and I just released. Like, I know it's not a unique thing per se, but I was just, the coincidences were so on the nose for the timing. I mean, literal 4 day difference in my book Respire that was released in October 21st, 2019. It's available on Amazon. Anyways, yeah, I don't know. Vicar Max, though, definitely became one of my favorite companions. How about you?
I haven't. He is not. How do I say this? He's not one of my companions. He did offer me a side mission when I was doing the main quest, but I kind of just didn't want to do it. For me, I guess I didn't care enough about him because I didn't try to. I like outlandishness, even though his character is outlandish. Um,
He's probably the darkest of the entire fucking crew, if I'm being honest with
I
you.
like Felix so far. I haven't began his side quest yet, but he seems like an odd one because he's just overly excited to join you on your adventure. He don't give a shit if he gets paid. He's more like, I need something to do. I'll do whatever it takes. And I think the world needs
And he's
more
such
of
a
that.
hopeful, optimistic guy.
Yeah. so
Just waiting at the boarding ramp of your ship, like, all right, let's go.
I what I really enjoy, I do enjoy the factions, the many factions, even though most of them are, um, not in my
Corporate or
right.
anti-corporate.
I do wish that, like, like in Fallout games, there are in different factions, and I don't know if it's fair. I would argue it is fair actually to use Fallout as the measure of comparison for this game because they created.
I mean, not for nothing, but yeah, what you were about to say, I'm sorry to cut you off. They did create New Vegas, and I feel like this was basically just them doing their version of that without ripping out Bethesda exactly.
And for me, New Vegas was so great because you could make decisions that either go one way or the other, it could either be really good toward a faction or really bad, or, and always my choice, you could choose the indifferent path. So I'll give you the option of taking over Mr. House in New Vegas was always the path I chose. And maybe that's
I did all of them, but I definitely stayed away from Caesar's Legion as much as I
oh
could.
for me, I loved the way that that faction was written, but for me, I've always, especially in modern video games, this you should, in my opinion, if you want to call yourself a RPG, a role playing game, you should allow your players to get involved with even the most menial of factions in a deep, intimate level. I'm not saying let them join them. That would be great.
But have an effect
I
on
would love
those.
to join the Marauders. I'm just saying. They seem like they got shit
Oh, that would
figured
be really
out. They
fun.
just raid and shit. That would be a fun gameplay. I would love to see this universe with that gameplay. It's a great universe they've made. Even though I wouldn't describe it as an open world, their regions are very big, and it's very familiar gameplay. Me just jumping into it, it was very familiar instantly because it very much handles like Fallout. And I would make the joke of when I saw the gameplay video, "Oh, you mean Fallout in space?" And people were like, "Yeah, it's Fallout in space." Which
Pretty
so
much.
that's my measurement. I take Fallout New Vegas, which is my personal favorite Fallout, and that's my unit of measure to compare this game to. And so far, it's pretty good. Um, I just kind of wish those small, like it doesn't have to be the Marauders. It could be another, and again, maybe there's a faction I haven't got to play with yet that is this, but it would be another indifferent to the whole political. I mean, I'm sorry, corporate um, battles
Well,
going
corporate
on.
political.
Yeah, yeah. In this universe, corporate is political, government is corporate.
It's the
That's
fucking
why
worst hellscape I could
I
imagine.
think these sorts of subjects are so great, and a lot of people really enjoy reading them, whether or listening or watching, whether it's listening to a radio show, um, reading Respire, or reading your next novel. You can Respire doesn't have it as much, obviously. I just wanted to kind of squeeze that in there.
Honestly, well, sorry, keep going.
But yeah, I think the subject for a lot of people is so awesome because it's not that far off. Which for us, reading it, you try to put it in another, like, okay, this takes place in another universe. But when you look at these subjects, it's very realistic to most of us because you could definitely see that in modern society without going into political discussion. But one day I feel those would become one and the same. So that's what's so cool about this game to me is the universe it's created doesn't seem too far off. Yeah, it's wonky because Obsidian is great like that. They like to have wackiness, which is for me is awesome. If you have a
They want you to have like weird neon four-legged lizard dog things chasing you because if you're gonna do that, then it might as well be fun as opposed to Fallout, which even though I've played an excessive amount of hours of 3, New Vegas, and 4, is usually on the more bleak and dreary side of things. Although I will say New Vegas did a great job of being a little bit brighter, which was a big part of it for me, like the setting of it and the story. And New Vegas itself, like all the missions you do once you get there, are probably the best parts of any Fallout game for me.
Yes, and with New Vegas, that wacky wildness, I think might have been wacky wilderness, something like that. It was a perk you could get pretty instantly in the game. Always enable it because when I when I saw the Indiana Jones reference, I was pretty tickled by it to see the skeleton in the refrigerator to show what would happen if you actually did that shit when a nuclear bomb.
Let me ask you
Mhm.
something. If I remember correctly, when New Vegas came out, I mean it did well, obviously, but for the most part, fans kind of shit on it for not being like 3, right? That was a big point. Like I'm not disremembering this or misremembering. People did not like New Vegas at first.
People don't, especially hardcore fans, and I'll admit this, like we were, on our earlier discussion without going back into it. If I'm real passionate about something and there's a big change, I'm going to already be skeptical. Though I would want what I'm passionate, my franchise of choice to innovate and change, which is healthy, or else, that franchise will die. I'm always kind of resilient to certain changes, so I could understand why the Fallout fans were a little resilient to New Vegas. For me, I think it's better because for me that wackiness will get me to engage with it more. That's what kind of 4 had its moments to where it was just so bleak. Even 3 for me, I didn't really care about exploring those wastelands. The characters weren't that interesting to me. The vaults in 3 were only like 2 of them though. But still, once you discover those 2 vaults, especially the one where you go into that simulation and before the bombs, the war happens, that was cool.
Mm-hmm.
But that had that wackiness element that I personally enjoy, but I couldn't be bothered to explore too much in those video games. Kind of, it's another critique I have of the Outer Worlds. Their characters, there are plenty of great characters. The worlds themselves, they are so linear. You could literally follow a road to most of your objectives, which is a small criticism I have about it. But again, it's a fair trade-off in my opinion for these hilarious characters, hilarious dialogue options, and even your companions.
And they're going to be working on more.
They're working on, I'm sorry, what?
I mean, they're gonna make a second game. They're probably gonna have DLC. I hope they're gonna have DLC because tell you something, the Outer Worlds, for lack of a better term, world that they build is nothing short of, like you said, wacky, fun, and amazing.
Yeah, I just wish their wildernesses were a little more worthwhile to explore. Now the cities, I feel very inclined to explore each of those little cities or hideouts. Just
Oh, I'll give
it's
you that.
fun to see the little marketing gimmicks that they have, like the Moonhead mask thing.
Yeah, but getting back to Fallout 3 real quick. I actually really did enjoy Fallout 3. Maybe it's because it was like one of my first major RPGs, because I think that came out when I was middle school around that time. So I just got really into it. I had a lot of fun playing it and exploring around, and that's kind of what sold me on like, no matter what, I got New Vegas, and I'm a fanboy, so I love New Vegas. New Vegas, I said it when it first came out. It's a great game. That's why I had to ask you if people hated it because everyone now is
Oh
just
yeah, I
blowing it
remember.
and blowing Obsidian, which is fine because they're great games. But what the fuck happened?
See, I think the issue was 3 wasn't terribly buggy. I've only played the PlayStation 3 port and the PC ports of 3, and I don't remember any game breaking bugs that Bethesda has been famous for. Um,
You cannot play New Vegas on the PS3. But go on.
and that's another thing.
It just lags. It gets too bad.
There's always been this bugginess to, even though, in my opinion, Obsidian, Fallout New Vegas, I experienced less bugs with that than I did 4, for instance, and
Yeah.
definitely less than 76. Wait until you get the
I haven't played too much 76 yet, but I can't wait to hop back on with you,
Wait
honestly.
until you get the naked bug. Um, but yeah,
Oh,
this
yeah.
game, The Outer Worlds, is so damn polished. It's beautiful. It is, if it runs on my PC, being almost a brand new game. It's some damn good optimization, and I don't even have to lower the settings that great. This computer is good, but it can't run. I can barely run the Division on it.
Yeah. I mean, Outer Worlds, you get a good look at it. It's not like a beautiful landscape. They didn't spend a great time texturing it, but I don't, like you said, it's not a lot to explore, so you don't spend a lot of time looking around. You're focused on the enemies and just kind of
And the
moving.
weapons are pretty great. I really enjoy the Inferno Scythe. It seems a bit OP, but I had to actually go back and start over with a higher difficulty. I picked the story one because I was like, okay, I don't want to get overwhelmed by fighting. I want to be engaged in the story and not worry about equipment management as much. But it was just a little too easy with that Inferno Scythe, so I had to go back.
Yeah, I've heard that's actually a critique a lot of people have. The game's just too easy to play, which, I mean, I guess I don't really remember my first playthrough, but I did beat it and immediately go back for 2 or 3 more. So,
Hey,
I mean, I'm on my fifth or sixth
I've
playthrough, I
gotten my
think.
ass kicked a couple times. I'm not saying it's Doom levels of difficult, but for me it can have a challenge. But this game ain't really as much about you know being challenged by combat as much as it is being challenged by story decision. which is why
Yeah,
I think it's so good. I really want more, even though I haven't beat it. I feel like there's a lot of room for more substance, only because when you use space, I have this
you do
expectation,
have options to open it
right?
up for a lot more.
Right, and, I the decision to go single player, I mean, I think it's a good decision, even though it would be great to co-op in this world, run your own Guardians of the Galaxy crew. I just kinda wish, certain decisions were a bit more impactful like they were in Fallout New Vegas, but, that's really my only criticism is that, like, it's based off of comparisons to New Vegas, which is arguably unfair.
I don't know. I mean, New Vegas itself, yeah, it's a different franchise and everything altogether. It is the same company, so I feel like you're going to have a lot of crossover, like we've talked
Right.
about, with how it feels.
And it's an older game, so that's a big mark of the measure too. If an older video game does story, I mean, gameplay decisions that that you think are, that most people agree are better, or even a good chunk of people would agree was better. Why not use it in the modern game age? Which again, they could. I'm not that far. I imagine I'm probably only a third. I've only been to Terra 2 and Monarch. I've been to Monarch like once. um,
Monarch.
I'm on my second return where I'm near Stellar Bay, so I don't think I'm that far into the game. Even though the way I approach these
No, you're not terribly
games
far.
is I tend to stay on the straight and narrow for the main quest. Even with Skyrim, I beat the main quest. It was the first thing, the first major quest line I beat. So for this game, I
Huh.
could see like beating the main quest line fairly quickly. It's just always been my issue as a RPG game player. I might get more enveloped in the overall story, and even though these side missions are cool, I just don't want to personally deviate if I'm really engaged in the main quest line. Which right now it's so shrouded in mystery to me because of how it starts with you, kind of being thrusted out of the cryo freeze and all that. I
They're literally like, design your character. You're a fry cook. Okay, you're waking up. Here's a mad
Yep.
scientist. You're going to talk to him, and fuck you.
For
Survive.
me, there's no better way to get me engaged than to open a game like that. Even like that Fallout 4. I did not deviate from the quest. First off, as a parent, it was a little personal in that regard. But also, even if you're not a parent, you can only you get to see through their fucking eyes, man. That's pretty brutal to kind of witness. But it's all shrouded in mystery, so that really keeps you wanting
That's true.
wanting.
Fallout 4 story is actually really good in my
Yes,
opinion. I really enjoyed the way it went.
I,
But quick spoilers for that story because I have to ask you, since you are a parent, you probably did this differently. People who haven't played Fallout 4 don't know the plot twist. Skip ahead just a minute or so. So your son, father, what did you do? Because I recently shot him in the back of the head on top of the CIT
I've
building and left him for
I've
rotting.
done two things. I completely complied with him and worked with him. Was my first decision to go through, and it didn't quite feel good. Even though he dies of age and he seems to be arguably a good person, I still wanted to go join the Brotherhood of Steel and do their ending. The second time, yeah, I took your a similar approach, killed him, kind of like he became this sort of monster. But even then, they lead you on. I mean, there's no way that the institute didn't design a lot of the shit you've been through knowing you would make it and come this far. You know,
Well, yeah, it does me so much to say that he basically just picked you for it, or
right.
you're the institute's second choice. So when he unfroze you, I'm sure there were some things that he set up to test your
Which
abilities.
arguably shows a devalue of a person's emotional state, mental state. That's a heartstring you don't really want to tug on for most people. But I was always taken back by the fact that your kid's older than you. So that was always a weird twist to me. With your son, father.
We should hop off spoilers real quick for everyone else's sake, 'cause I did say skip ahead a bit. But to segue back to a non-spoilery part of Fallout 4, I found that my strategy for accumulating just an awful smog level of caps is to become a water baron, very similar to Dune. You just stick huge water purifiers in like the first town that you're in, and you just let them milk and milk and get hundreds of bottles of water and just sell that shit for a
You know,
buck.
I've never been terribly engaged with the camp and crafting system before.
I have a lot of fun with it. It's basically just my version of Animal Crossing, but a more horrific version.
Then I see a huge appeal in I almost said New Vegas, in Fallout 76 for you then, because the crafting of your own camp, you can create these shops where other players can come by and openly buy things from your vendors at your hideout.
Yes, Adrian, the masterful dude of dudeness on the Fan Freaks podcast, and one of the upcoming trivia contestants for the Resi trivia, is actually a Fallout 76 player, and he talks about how he really enjoys doing the settlement thing like it's Animal Crossing, and that's kind of where I came with the same analogy for me is when I play Fallout 4, it's like the same thing. You're just doing Animal Crossing similar to what you're talking about with 76 or like he mentioned.
So that's why it has this big appeal. So for people who want to follow the story or be a bit more like Adrian and build these vending sites to make it a bit more like Animal Crossing, or like me, I'm more into the exploration aspect of this game. Even though I've explored almost not every interior, but I've explored a big chunk of it, and I'm a big fan of it. The monster, I mean, everything you encounter is very challenging. However, which I could love hate with, especially if your challenges depend on killing legendary creatures. Unless you got a friend who's a solid level 80 with power armor, you may not do too well.
I really can't wait to get to the cryptozoics because that's one of the big things about Fallout for me is just the world, like the world building, the lore, the background. I talked about this briefly on episode 2 or 3 with I think it was episode 3 with Trevor, where we were discussing R2D2. It's a great episode, guys. Go back and check that out. But how Fallout is basically just something that, as like a world building and lore, I just love the way they set it up with monsters and the dystopian hellscapes, small communities, and warring factions. I mean, if you even read the synopsis or the brief description for my book, Respire, or just watch our short film, at least I feel like you'd get definite like vibes that we are at least fans or budding attempts at getting a very Fallout esque feel on some occasions. Because at least for the book, for me, I did try to set the world itself up to be a little bit more like Fallout.
I really enjoyed Trevor's. I listened to that. I really enjoyed Trevor's take on a lot of that. And it was a great episode. You guys really should check it out. And I also wanted to thank you, Trevor, for complimenting our skit.
Yeah, Trevor was a great guy to
Um,
have on the
I'm,
show. He really had some strong opinions about R2D2.
oh yeah, that's the good thing about engaging in discussion with Trevor. He feels very strongly, whereas I tend to be almost indifferent, except for clearly Resident Evil. um, I love talking with people like that who can have such a strong yes or a no just to pick their brain. And he had a lot of valid reasons, in my opinion. He swayed me on
I
R2D2.
still reason that R2D2 just has massive fucking PTSD and needs to be left alone, alright? He is just an overworked
He just
droid.
needs love.
He saves them all the time. It
Well,
might be convenient, but give the guy a fucking break. Let him be a little stressed out, man. Do you have any closing thoughts on Outer World? Outer Worlds?
um, Outer Worlds. I mean, again, I'm only probably like a quarter of the way into it. I mean, I might be a third. I don't know. It's hard for me to judge because I haven't seen the game in its entirety. I just really would like to be able to um, interact with these, bad guy factions, as it were, a bit more. Or, I wouldn't even mind a couple more indifferent factions. So, but overall, it's a great video game. It's definitely worth. I bought it for $30. It's available for $30 on. I don't know if it is now. So don't quote me on this. You guys might have been too late. But as of when I purchased it last week, it was available on Epic Games Store, PlayStation Network, digital for $30, and it is definitely worth $30. And this is coming from a guy who is so damn cheap. I didn't want to buy Resident Evil 3 remake for anything less than 20. I mean, anything more than $15. So
Damn.
great game, worthy of a buy. Even I would even I mean I wouldn't. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say I wouldn't pay 60 for it. Just being honest, in its current state. That is not to say there's probably a bunch to it I have not seen yet, but very great game. I recommend to buy it at its current price, which I believe is still $30 American.
Yeah, I mean, I paid 60 for it when it first came out, and which is why I insisted that we talk about it on the show because I wanted to, appreciate the game fully. And when I beat it, I mentioned this earlier. When I beat it the first time, I just went, started a new game, and that's just the main game I played until I beat it 3 or 4 times all the way through. I believe I just kept having fun, like re-exploring the options and the different dialogue, which isn't entirely as expansive as I'd like, but you do have the different factions and plans to get into.
I do kind of wish that the dialogue, like if it's a final option, like for I think I don't remember the guy's name is like Sanjar or something like
What
that.
character?
I he has uh he's
Mad
a
scientist?
oh god I- he's like part of this broadcast system
Oh
that
yeah,
shut
yeah.
down
The,
on
the ironclad
right.
leader.
Yes. I remember he was asking about some item I went and got
Printing
for him,
press mechanism.
and I think it was after that, and he asked if I had it, and I was like, "Oh no, wait, I don't. That's just what I call my left nut." And that was a final option. Like I couldn't explore any more dialogue options after that, other than giving him the item. So I kind of wish I knew that was a
You
final
chose that, didn't
dialogue.
you?
Yeah,
Of
of
course.
course I
I thought about it
did.
because I didn't. I just played that mission and I chose, the other one. But I was reading it as I hit it. I'm like, wait, my left nut. I'm like, that's hilarious. Why the
Yeah,
fuck can I choose that? Turns out it's the final one.
you can't. Yeah, you can't ask him about like what he's gonna do with the files or anything. That just leads to here you go. But it's a great little that zaniness is great. The Outer World is great, guys. There's no other way to put it. Maybe not, in my opinion, $60 great. Definitely 40, 50, maybe.
Yeah, it's a fun world to explore, fun themes, especially when you have warring factions. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't care what you're doing. It's just nice to have options. That's why I like RPGs, I feel like.
Oh yeah,
All right. You got any final
it's a
words,
great
things you
read.
want to plug, man, before we get out of here?
Smegma, as well as
Uh,
we are we are and snowballs.
Snowballing.
Uh, You know what I
Yeah,
mean.
I do.
Snowball.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'll tell that story some other time. Oh, it's not snowballed. It
Okay,
involves the
just
hostess treat snowballs everybody, but it's funny. Anyways,
just my usual, check out Red Lens Productions. We are going to be full on marketing our sketch comedy and restructuring it as a show. So season 1 of our sketch comedy show, Who Asked for This, should be ready by November. To go ahead and fully release. So that'd be good if you guys have checked it out. It'll be structured a bit differently, much like those comedy shows we grew up watching of old. Um, it might be even worth to you know, type in the Arclay report in your Facebook search bar and see what happens. Maybe something will happen in the next couple of months with that. But that's the only little plugs I got.
yeah, guys, Redlands Productions on Facebook, Robots Don't Age on Twitter, and I'm also on Twitter at Cody S Coffee. Just feel free to come by and shoot us a message, especially if you're one of the listeners from Denmark or Romania, because I saw those pop up there and I thought that was interesting. So if you guys are still listening, especially. But other than that, I just like it. And you guys say, hey, I will catch you guys later.